Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 7 Part 26 based on novel. So let's start. When Lin Dong stood before the grey-robed man, the flowing air above the gigantic platform instantly showed signs of solidifying. The surrounding Dao sect disciples felt as though their hearts were being tightly grasped by a giant hand. Amongst the two people before their eyes, one was once a renowned genius of Sky Hall, who now had an infamous reputation within Eastern Xian region. The other was also a surprising talent that was becoming extremely famous in Dao sect. Both of them were outstanding and have displayed their capabilities. However, when these two sharp spears came in contact with each other, it would be unavoidable for them to pierce at the other. Due to the sudden appearance of a figure in front of him, Wang Yang's footsteps came to a halt. His unfocused eyes slightly shifted once, before his gaze came to rest on Lin Dong's body. The indifference on Wang Yang's face was unchanged by Lin Dong's appearance. His numb eyes stared at Lin Dong, before a majestic and imposing aura that reeked of blood slowly unfurled from his body. Wang Yang's aura was filled with malignant intent. This was a malignant aura that had been acquired after fighting and killing through countless life or death situations. This was undoubtedly extremely frightening for the disciples who mostly stayed in the sect to train. Therefore, some of the surrounding disciples' faces instantly turned pale white. The current Wang Yang truly felt like a person who had climbed out from a pile of corpses. To them, such a person was the truly terrifying one. Lin Dong frowned a little as he stood before Wang Yang. He could feel the baleful and gloomy pressure from Wang Yang's body trying to envelope him. He had no choice but to acknowledge that Wang Yang was indeed extremely dangerous. After all, Wang Yang had experienced countless life or death situations and had even crawled out from a pile of corpses. However, Lin Dong was similarly not a disciple that grew up in a greenhouse like the Dao sect. He did not have any background and had walked out from Qingyang town. Step by step, he had finally reached this point today. What he had experienced was not lacking even when compared to what Wang Yang had been through. Therefore, although Wang Yang's baleful and gloomy aura was able to intimidate other Dao sect disciples, it had no effect on Lin Dong. Lin Dong's eyes were like the deep abyss within an ancient well as he stared back at Wang Yang without showing any signs of yielding. At the same time, there were no indications of him backing off. When he saw how Lin Dong was as unmoving as a mountain, Wang Yang was momentarily astonished. But soon after, his eyebrows knitted together, pulling some of the scars on his face. A faint and terrible aura started to appear. Senior brother Wang Yang. Just as Wang Yang's expression was about to reach the limits of his patience, Ying Huan hastily appeared in front of Lin Dong with a forced smile on her face as she spoke. Senior brother Wang Yang, this is Lin Dong and he has just joined our Dao sect for less than a year. Lin Dong? When this name entered his ear, Wang Yang's expression changed. His gaze rested on Lin Dong's face as he replied in a hoarse voice, the Lin Dong that fought with Yao Ling and both ended up seriously injured. Ying Huan nodded her head. She did not expect that even Wang Yang had heard of this matter. I had once tried to chase and kill Yao Ling for 2 months. However, he still managed to escape in the end despite suffering severe injuries. I never imagined that he would fall at your hands. Wang Yang continued to look at Lin Dong as he continued, Dao sect managed to produce a pretty decent disciple this time around. I know what you want to say, however, there is no one who can change my decision. Lin Dong fell silent for a while. Soon after, his soft voice rang out, Senior brother Wang Yang, aren't you being a little selfish? When Ying Huan heard his words, her expression immediately changed as she hastily tried to signal Lin Dong with her eyes. However, he turned a blind eye to her and instead extended his hand out and pulled her behind him. A ferocious glint could be faintly seen in his eyes, as he fearlessly looked straight at Wang Yang. Wang Yang's gloomy eyes stared back at Lin Dong. A moment later, he said in an indifferent manner, after accomplishing my heart's desire, I will express gratitude to Dao sect with my life. Lin Dong frowned. He could sense the extreme prejudice and deep hatred in senior brother Wang Yang's heart. The deep hatred within his heart had already corroded his mind. When a person like him made a decision, it would not be easy anyone to change it. If you want to stop me, you will have to defeat me. However, I will not show mercy, said Wang Yang as he looked towards Lin Dong and Ying Huan. Ying Huan bit her lip as her jade-like hands involuntarily clenched tightly. Huff. Lin Dong deeply breathed out in a slightly helpless manner. After that, under the gazes of the surrounding people, he slowly nodded his head and replied, "In that case, let us meet in the hall competition, senior brother Wang Yang." Wang Yang's face twitched once as he gazed at Lin Dong. It seemed that he wanted to know the source of Lin Dong's confidence, however, he did not say anything in the end. He nodded his head indifferently, before walking around Lin Dong and Ying Huan as he gradually departed. Quite some time had passed after Wang Yang had walked away, before the atmosphere on the platform gradually started to relax. However, a majority of the disciples had complex expressions on their faces. They knew that the upcoming hall competition might become quite troublesome due to the return of Wang Yang. Lin Dong tilted his head over and looked at Ying Huan's dull and dim face. He smiled and said, "There's no need to be too worried. Although senior brother Wang Yang is powerful, big senior sister Xiao is also someone that is not easy to deal with. The eventual victor is still up in the air." "I hope so." Ying Huan softly sighed. Right now, the only thing she could do was to hope that Ying Xiao was able to stop the crazy Wang Yang. If Wang Yang was allowed to acquire the commanding authority, the great sect competition might turn into quite a bloodbath. Although it was already a very bloody event. Most importantly, Wang Yang held a high degree of respect, particularly amongst the experienced older Dao sect disciples. After all, in the past, the outstanding disciples from the four halls like Ying Xiao, Qing Yi and Mu Li could only look up to him from behind. In addition, there was a deep grudge between Dao sect and Yuan Gate, and there were many disciples who bore hatred towards Yuan Gate. Although they would normally not create too huge of a disturbance due to Ying Xuan's efforts, it would be a different story if Wang Yang were to acquire the commanding authority. He would perhaps lead these disciples in a fight to the death against Yuan Gate. In all their previous clashes, the average strength of all the Dao sect disciples would always be weaker than Yuan Gate. Therefore, such a death battle would no doubt lead to certain death. "I have to go and report this to Big Sis." Ying Huan still felt somewhat uneasy. Although she knew that the present Ying Xiao was different from the past, Wang Yang was still someone that could not be dealt with easily. Some of the news that was transmitted back to the sect from time to time caused even Ying Xuanzi to be astonished. Lin Dong nodded his head and did not say anything else. As he watched Ying Huan hurriedly leaving figure, his eyebrows started to wrinkle. In the end, he sighed. An ordinary hall competition had suddenly become so complicated. In the few days that followed, Lin Dong did not manage to see Ying Huan again. As news of Wang Yang's return started to spread across the sect, quite a disturbance. Although the newer disciples did not know who this senior brother Wang Yang was, when they found out that he was actually ranked second on that sect's wanted list, all of them had faces full of shock. However, some of the sharper disciples were able to think on a deeper level. For example, the reason why Wang Yang would suddenly return after disappearing for so many years. After surmising a few answers, their expressions changed. However, they did not speak about it in the end, and could only sigh secretly. Looks like this year's hall competition would become rather chaotic. However, as the disciples excitedly discussed news of this matter amongst themselves, the higher echelons of Dao sect maintained their silence. As for Wang Yang, after returning to the sect, he did not go and pay his respect to any elders. Instead, he returned to his residential mountain peak and locked the doors as he quietly waited for the hall competition to arrive. When faced with such an extreme person, even Lin Dong felt somewhat helpless. He knew about the past incident from Ying Huan. Wang Yang's sister was surrounded and killed by Yuan Gate while she was trying to protect the Dao sect disciples as they scattered and retreated. In the end, Dao sect chose to make peace with the involved parties. It was obvious that even the higher levels of Dao sect felt somewhat guilty to Wang Yang due to this incident. Therefore, typically speaking, Dao sect would not use other methods to remove Wang Yang from the upcoming hall competition. After all, Wang Yang was still a Dao sect disciple. Under such an atmosphere, time rapidly elapsed, while the atmosphere within the sect, that was seething with excitement, started to inflate. This inflation continued till the one day when it finally reached its peak. Creak! A door was pushed open as Lin Dong stepped out from within. Spreading his hands, he allowed the warm sunlight to envelope him. Faintly closing his eyes, he basked in the boiling atmosphere that was surging through the skies. Finally, he breathed in deeply before opening his eyes. Within his eyes was a fearsome glint. The whole competition had finally arrived. At the center region of the Tao sect was an unbroken chain of mountains. Within the mountain range was a towering mountain. The peak of the mountain pierced through the skies, and was surrounded by clouds and mists. It appeared just like a paradise. However, at this point of time, the usually peaceful mountain peak was bustling with life and noise. The noise from this area could be clearly heard even from 100 miles away. The whole competition was the grandest competition held by Tao sect every year. The entire Tao sect, regardless if one wasn't an elder or disciple, held this competition in high regard. When Lin Dong reached and gazed upon this majestic sight, he could not help but click his tongue. He flew directly towards a gigantic mountain peak located at very center of the area. Since the number of participants for the whole competition was exceptionally huge, the mountain peaks around the area were filled with competition arenas. However, the most eye-catching arena belonged to the mountain peak Lin Dong was flying towards. This arena was where the most outstanding disciples of the four halls would compete. As such, the atmosphere on this mountain peak was far more lively and bustling than the others. And at this point in time, this mountain peak was already overflowing with people. Lin Dong took a sweeping glance of the place and found the area where all the Desolate Hall disciples were located, before he flew towards that direction. Senior brother Lin Dong is here. As Lin Dong arrived, the Desolate Hall disciples let out cries of surprise. Following which, numerous passionate gazes were cast at Lin Dong. Ever since Lin Dong had successfully comprehended the Great Desolation scripture, his reputation in the Desolate Hall had undoubtedly surpassed the experienced great direct disciples like Pang Tong and Jiang Hao. Pang Tong and the rest were not disturbed by this and were not resentful. Lin Dong's ability to comprehend the Great Desolation scripture had thoroughly convinced them of his strength and capability. You always have to be the last to arrive, Pang Tong laughed as Lin Dong landed beside him. I'm a bit late. Lin Dong smiled apologetically at Pang Tong and the rest. Ha ha, junior brother Lin Dong, whether or not our Desolate Hall's ranking will rise in the whole competition this time around all depends on you, Jiang Hao chuckled with a vigorous voice. Lin Dong merely smiled in response to these words. He raised his head and looked elsewhere. Not far away in the opposite direction of the Desolate Hall district were the districts belonging to the other three halls. Two figures stood at the very front in the Sky Hall district. They were the two most prominent figures of that district, Ying Xiao and Ying Huan. Regardless of where this pair of sisters went, they were always the most eye-catching figures in Tao sect. Ying Xiao was quiet as usual. However, Lin Dong noticed a trace of solemnness and helplessness in her eyes. These emotions must have been caused by the appearance of senior brother Wang Yang. Beside her, Ying Huan had regained her lovable and charming demeanor and wore a familiar innocent smile on her face. A tall and straight figure stood beside her. It was Qing Yi from the Earth Hall. At this point in time, both of them seemed to be chatting happily about something. When Lin Dong looked over, Ying Huan appeared to have noticed. The young girl tilted her head slightly and cast a glance at Lin Dong. Following which, she indifferently withdrew her gaze. However, when she withdrew her gaze, Lin Dong clearly saw a look of joy in her large eyes. When Qing Yi saw the Ying Huan casually glance at Lin Dong, he could not help but stick out his chest a little more and give Lin Dong a slight smile. His smile contained a slightly pleased expression. When Lin Dong saw the small actions of these two, he could not help but feel like laughing. Qing Yi seemed to have taken him as a rival in love. Junior brother Lin Dong, little junior sister Huan is being eyed by an unknown number of people in Tao sect. If you want to take action, you better hurry up. Otherwise, she will be taken by Simone like Qing Yi, Pang Tong and the rest teased mischievously when they saw Ying, Huan and Qing Yi standing together in the distance. Lin Dong cast a glance at Jiang Hao and found out for the first time that this fellow actually had a cheeky side to him. Soon after, the former could only shake his head helplessly as he replied, "You think too much. This is the first time in so many years that we have seen little junior sister Huan show such consideration. Junior brother Lin Dong, if you can get your hands on our Dao sect's little princess, it will be much more exciting than obtaining first place for our desolate hall," the usually earnest Pang Tong chirped in and teased as well. "Ha ha, senior brother Pang Tong is right. It's all up to senior brother Lin Dong to revitalize our desolate hall's reputation." The desolate hall disciples around them roared with laughter upon hearing Pang Tong's words. In response to his fellow disciples, Lin Dong had nothing to say and could only shake his head. Just as he was about to speak, his mind suddenly jolted and he shifted his gaze towards the space above the mountain peak. A grey figure accompanied by a blood-reeking aura of chilliness flew across the sky. He descended from the sky and landed at the district where the Sky Hall disciples were. When this figure appeared, the clamor in the entire mountain peak quieted down significantly. However, he ignored the complicated stares from the onlookers. At the same time, he did not get close to the Sky Hall disciples. When he landed, he merely cast an indifferent glance at the Ying sisters. Following which, he sat down and closed his eyes. Ying Xiao looked at the grey-robed figure and lightly bit her lips. Soon after, she clenched her lily-white hands as a determined look gradually appeared in her clear eyes. "Big sis." To the side, Ying Huan's lily-white hand gently grasped Ying Xiao's wrist. "I will stop him." Ying Xiao turned her head and gave Ying Huan a smile. However, the latter could clearly sense the helplessness and bitterness in the former's smile. Ying Huan did not say anything else and nodded her head reluctantly. Even though she always had confidence in Ying Xiao, that confidence had declined significantly this time. While Ying Huan's mood was slightly downcast, her large jet-black eyes unknowingly looked in Lin Dong's direction, but she quickly laughed at herself. If Ying Xiao could not stop Wang Yang, even if Lin Dong had successfully comprehended the Great Desolation scripture, it would be useless as well. Meanwhile, ever since Wang Yang appeared, Lin Dong's gaze had been fixed on the former's figure. According to his senses, senior brother Wang Yang's strength should be around the 9 Yuan Nirvana stage. Furthermore, his strength did not lose out to Ying Xiao, while a strong feeling of danger lingered in his mind. "That senior brother Wang Yang, I didn't expect him to be back." Pang Tong similarly looked over and sighed deeply, as a complicated expression appeared on his face. As the most senior disciple of the Desolate Hall, he clearly knew something about Wang Yang's story. To the side, Jiang Hao, Fang Yun and the rest also looked over. Soon after, they felt their hair stand on ends, as they muttered, "No wonder senior brother Wang Yang is ranked second on the sect's wanted list. None of the disciples in the sect can match his presence. This time around, there's going to be a great show at the hall competition. I'm afraid senior sister Xiao will not allow senior brother Wang Yang to obtain the commanding authority over the disciples in the great sect competition," Pang Ting sighed. Upon hearing this, Jiang Hao and his counterparts nodded their heads silently. Lin Dong pursed his lips. Even though senior brother Wang Yang was merely sitting down with both his eyes closed, the atmosphere of the place had already become somewhat weird. Even though he had left Dao sect for many years, his reputation did not lose out in the slightest to Ying Xiao. Lin Dong's gaze turned towards the platform to his front. The seats for the elders of the Dao sect were located there. At this moment, the 4 hall leaders were seated in their respective chairs. At the utmost center was Ying Xuanzi, whose face looked as calm as a serene lake. The atmosphere on the platform was not as lively as expected. The 4 hall leaders looked at each other and cast a glance together in Wang Yang's direction. Their eyes were filled with helplessness and gloominess. "Sect Master, with regards to this issue," Qi Lei, the Sky Hall leader, said in a soft voice as he clenched his teeth. "Proceed according to the rules," Ying Xuanzi replied plainly without batting an eyelid. According to the rules, Wang Yang can leave the Sky Hall and become a Dao sect deacon. Therefore, he is not qualified to participate in the hall competition, Qi Lei explained in a low voice. However, he's still a disciple of the Sky Hall. Ying Xuanzi looked at Qi Lei and sighed. He waved his hand and instructed, "It's about time." Announced the start of the whole competition. Qi Lei was helpless, and could only nod his head. He stood up and took a sweeping glance across the seemingly endless sea of people on the mountain peak with an intense and sharp look. Under such gaze from Qi Lei, the previously rowdy mountain peak gradually turned quiet. "I assume that the rules of the whole competition have been explained to you by your respective hall leaders. Therefore, I shall not explain any further. However, be reminded that the whole competition is merely a platform for exchanging pointers and training, not a place where you settle your personal grudges. Hence, please take note of when to stop. If anyone has any intentions of killing their fellow disciples, the sect will not easily let you off." Qi Lei's booming voice resounded throughout the area. Eventually, his voice echoed in between the nearby mountains. As he finished his last sentence, his gaze shot towards the grey-robed figure seated in the distance. However, the latter did not move, as if he had not heard anything. "Before you came here, everyone should have obtained an arena number from their respective halls. Next, you will enter the arena based on your arena number." As Qi Lei finished his sentence, the mountain peak regained its boiling atmosphere. Many disciples flipped their palms as a jade token appeared in their hands. Subsequently, an overwhelming number of people surged out and flew towards the various arenas on the mountain peak. Upon seeing this, Lin Dong smiled and flipped his palm as a jade token appeared in his hand. The word A5 was written on the jade token. After taking a glance at the arena number on the jade token, Lin Dong's gaze swept out before his body flew out. Under numerous gazes, he landed on a spacious arena. When Lin Dong landed on the arena, his surroundings suddenly broke out into an alarmed uproar. This startled Lin Dong. Soon after, he saw a beautiful figure that was holding a jade-green zither gliding through the air. This figure landed gracefully in front of him. Lin Dong suddenly felt a slight headache as he gazed upon that captivating face in front of him. Never did he imagine that his first opponent would be Ying Huan. On the spacious stage, the young lady smiled at Lin Dong, who had a helpless expression on his face. The clothes wrapping around her soft and slender body revealed her alluring curves. Under the rays of the sun, the originally beautifully young lady became even more dazzling. In that moment, the gazes on the arena grew even more feverish. "Why is it you?" Lin Dong's head was hurting a little as he asked. "Why not? I'm also a participant. Don't tell me that you are going to stop me from taking part in the whole competition." Ying Huan replied while carrying her zither with both arms. She tilted her head slightly as she looked at Lin Dong, while smiling craftily like a small fox. "What's so funny about this? Are you happy to meet me in the first match?" Lin Dong asked as he shook his head. Ying Huan wrinkled her eyebrows slightly. Her jet-black eyes turned for a while, before she nodded her head and replied, "This seems to be a problem. It's going to be a little difficult for me to deal with a savage like you. You're asking for it." The corners of Lin Dong's mouth twitched. He had the impulse to lift her up and throw her off the stage. "Why not let me win this match?" Ying Huan's light-colored eyebrows lifted as she smiled sweetly. "Dream on." Lin Dong ill-humoredly rolled his eyes at her. "Before take a step forward, first of all, let me warn you. Once I take action, I won't show any mercy to girls, so be careful." "Why must you be so heartless?" Ying Huan asked with a bitter face. Although Lin Dong knew she was putting up an act, he still felt his head ache. She was deliberately generating hate for him. Already, he could feel all kinds of vicious glares directed at him from his surroundings. Lin Dong knew that he might not be able to deal with Ying Huan in the confrontation of words. Therefore, without any more superfluous words, he gently gripped his hands, as vigorous Yuan power swelled and erupted from his body. "Humph! You really believe that this young lady is scared of you?" Upon seeing Lin Dong react in such a way, Ying Huan gave a soft snort, before she kept the playfulness on her face. What she had previously said was naturally mostly comprised of jokes. Although she was usually weird and bizarre, she would never ask for such excessive requests from Lin Dong before the match. A conceited fellow like yourself has been an eyesore since the beginning. Watch how this young lady shall deal with you today. Ying Huan muttered like a broken record. With a wave of her jade-like hand, her seated form floated in the air. She placed the jade-green zither on her legs, before her perfect jade-like hands descended on it. As Ying Huan's jade-like hand descended on the zither, the expression on her face turned serene, while light gathered in her huge eyes. In the end, they carried some sharpness as she stared at Lin Dong. Beneath the sharpness of her stare was some stubbornness and reluctance to admit defeat. Previously, when Lin Dong was on the palace selection stage, his strength was not even able to catch Ying Huan's attention. However, in less than a year, Lin Dong's strength has advanced by leaps and bounds, and he has even surpassed her. Although Ying Huan did not show it, under her lively exterior was a similarly arrogant heart. She was unwilling to let Lin Dong fling her way by so much. As the sharpness within her big eyes gathered, Ying Huan's hand suddenly strummed her zither. Immediately, a soft fluttering sound rang out, causing many rays of jade-green light arcs to directly explode and sweep forward before they ferociously flew towards Lin Dong. Bang bang. In response to the jade-green light arcs that were flying towards him, Lin Dong stretched out his palm and made a sudden grasp. He pinched them and forcefully crushed them before they even reached his body. Ying Huan was at the Huan Nirvana stage, which was slightly weaker when compared to the Great Precipice Cave's Huan. However, her style was rather unique, and she used sound waves to attack. This attack was extremely peculiar, and if one was not careful, one would get struck by this move and fall into disadvantageous position. Therefore, although Lin Dong displayed a calm expression, there was a trace of cautiousness in his heart when he faced her assault. When she saw her attacks being so easily dismissed by Lin Dong, Ying Huan frowned a little. Only when she stood opposite Lin Dong did she realize how difficult it was to deal with him. Most importantly, the latter's eyes were as tranquil as a deep abyss. Together with his surging aura, his attack and defense were totally integrated into one, and it could be said that he was completely impregnable. Such an opponent was really not easy to deal with. As Ying Huan's jade-like hands landed on her zither, she bit her lip, raising a stubborn arc from the corners of her mouth. Shortly after, her jade-like hand suddenly pressed down on the zither. Subsequently, fresh dark red blood flowed out from her palm. In the next instant, innumerable threads of blood started to spread out one by one from the jade-green zither. Buzz! A boundless fluctuation suddenly surged out from Ying Huan's body. Dreadful red light that blotted the skies erupted from her within the body, before rapidly changing into a gigantic body tree behind her. The body tree gently swayed as its leaves swung back and forth. This caused an extremely melodious and pleasantly sounding sound wave to echo across sky. The gigantic body tree that suddenly appeared in the arena rapidly attracted quite a bit of attention. Soon after, gasps rapidly spread. Obviously, this was the reputed formidable martial art of Sky Hall that was only inferior to Sky Emperor scripture. Huan has actually obtained such mastery of the formless body sound. This is truly rare. On the front seats, Sky Hall Master Chi Lei could not help but remark with a smile as he watched this scene. Although the formless body sound is not weak, it will likely be of no threat to Lin Dong. This lass is truly somewhat unlucky to have met Lin Dong in her first match. Ying Xuanzi chuckled and said, Lin Dong doesn't seem like a person who would go easy on a girl. Looks like that lass Huan will have to endure some pain this time. Earth Hall Master Mo Jingtian also said with a smile. When the people nearby heard his words, they softly chuckled and watched the stage with interest. Formless body sound. Ying Huan's pretty face turned slightly solemn. In the next moment, her huge eyes looked at Lin Dong once, before her slender jade-like hand suddenly strummed the zither, all beings form. As the resulting sound wave suddenly spread out, the body tree started to shake. For a time, this melodious sound reverberated across the entire sky. As the sound wave resounded across the sky, the space in front of Lin Dong started to twist like a mirror. A form that was identical to Lin Dong slowly stepped out of it under his somewhat amazed gaze. Interesting. As Lin Dong gazed at the figure that was identical to himself, he could not resist but raise his eyebrows. He could sense that the shadow not only looked identical to him, but also had its own powerful Yuan power fluctuation within its body. It was obvious that this copy was not merely an illusionary image, but a copy based on his strength. Naturally, this copy did not have Lin Dong's complete strength. However, it was still quite troublesome to deal with. Ying Huan had used this move when she intercepted Yao Ling and the rest. It was through this move that she was able to obstruct Yao Ling and the rest for so long. After seeing the astonished expression on Lin Dong's face, a little self-satisfaction flashed past her face. With a light raise of her jade-like hand, the copy suddenly shot forward with ferocious force as it approached Lin Dong. Di? Lin Dong directly received the punch from the copy. The punch had roughly half the power of his own. From the looks of it, the discrepancy of the copy created by Ying Huan was due to the difference their strength. After a fruitless punch, the copy rushed directly at Lin Dong without any fear. At this instant, its forehead started to wrinkle as a grey eye appeared. A grey light beam shot towards Lin Dong at lightning speed. Lin Dong flicked with his finger as green light gathered to form a green scale in front of him, completely blocking the grey light beam. Just as he was prepared to counterattack, a faintly discernible zither sound was suddenly transmitted over. Due to the zither sound, the Yuan energy surging within the body unexpectedly slowed. Realizing the changes in his body, Lin Dong frowned as he glanced at Ying Huan. Although her face was slightly pale, she still continued to use her Yuan power to strum her zither in an attempt to disrupt him. This sound wave is useless against me. Lin Dong lightly spat out a mouthful of air. With a thought, devouring power started to spread within his body, completely devouring all the sound power that was invading his body. Bang! At this moment, berserk Yuan power finally erupted from Lin Dong's body. A formidable glint flashed across his originally calm eyes. Anyone could tell that he was planning to make a serious move. Upon seeing this, a tense expression flashed past Ying Huan's pupils. However, without giving her a chance to act, Lin Dong had already stepped forward and appeared beside the copy. Without any unnecessary actions, his palm directly pierced through its defenses at lightning speed and landed on its chest. Kai! No force erupted from the palm that had landed on the copy's chest. Instead, strand after strand of fine black lines shot out of. Soon after, devouring power suddenly erupted. Bang! As devouring power stealthily surged out, the copy immediately started to tremble violently, before exploding with a resounding bang and transforming into nothingness. Lin Dong's combat prowess far surpassed his cultivation level in many different aspects. It was also obvious that the copy Ying Huan had created possessed only half of Lin Dong's usual power. Furthermore, she could not clone some of the other factors that amplified Lin Dong's combat prowess. Therefore, once Lin Dong took action, it was obvious that it would be difficult for the copy to block. When Ying Huan saw Lin Dong destroy the copy in a single move, alarm flashed across her eyes. However, she did not plan on admitting defeat yet. Gritting her teeth, she attempted to strum her zither again. Pa! However, just as she was about to strum her zither, a hand swept over suddenly and patted her zither, causing a thorough disturbance to the sound wave. You? Ying Huan raised her head and gazed at Lin Dong, who had appeared in front of her like a ghost. She bit her lip. With a thought, the leaves of the gigantic body tree behind her descended like sharp arrows. With swift and deadly force, they started to envelope Lin Dong. Lin Dong did not move. In a flash, vigorous mental power suddenly spread out, forming an invisible barrier around him. The leaves that were still some distance from his body directly exploded into dust and scattered away. With a gentle twist of his palm, devouring power surged out as a suction force emerged from his palm, directly snatching the zither from Ying Huan's bosom. Soon after, Lin Dong smiled at her and said, "You lose. Return my zither to me, I haven't lost." Ying Huan was stubborn and unwilling to admit defeat as she extended her hands, in hopes of snatching back her zither. Lin Dong leaned to one side, evading the young lady who was hurtling towards him. He proceeded to lift the zither and used it to unceremoniously spank the tender buttocks of the young lady. Pa! As a clear sound rang out, Lin Dong could feel that the originally noisy surroundings immediately turned much quieter. Following which, piercing and fiery gazes proceeded to blot the skies as they shot one after another towards him. You. Ying Huan had obviously turned silly due to Lin Dong's spank as she gawked for quite a while, before her small face turned red like fire due to shame. Her big eyes stubbornly glared Lin Dong. She was still somewhat unable to believe that she had actually been spanked by Lin Dong with her zither in front of such a large audience. After Lin Dong used the zither to spank her, he secretly felt a little regretful in his heart. However, the deed was already done. Therefore, when he saw a shame-filled and angry Ying Huan, all he could do was let out a dry laugh. Ying Huan's face was alluringly red. However, in the end, she managed to resist the urge to lunge at Lin Dong and viciously take a few bites out of him. She snatched the zither from Lin Dong's hands, and fled the stage while leaving behind an extremely humiliated and angry voice. Pervert. This video will end here.